Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and those of you still on the fence, we are back with another episode of Derailed, courtesy of Arcaicskidz. I'm, of course, your host, Arcaicskidz. We have Operation Libertas on the show. How are you, man?
Good, man. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate what you and everybody else who's podcasting is doing, because I know it's not easy, and it's not something that I'm ready to start doing. So I appreciate guys that are willing to do it.
Oh, it's not actually that hard. Making the connections is the hardest part. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But once you start making them, it kind of causes a snowball effect or whatever. It was just something I was like, oh, this might be fun. Let's give it a try. So, and then it actually
so has it been fun?
Oh yeah, it's been a lot of fun. My favorite episode I've done was I had Mark Schneider, who's a nuclear operator, retired from the Navy. So he's a nuclear operator on the submarines and then an aircraft carrier or two until he retired from that. Now he's in, the private sector, but he's pushing something he calls the green nuclear deal. And so I had him on a week ago. He'll be back on Saturday. And we've just been talking nuclear and how it's, the future, and the libertarians, I'm trying to get a bunch of libertarians to understand it better and get behind it so that they can, push back against all these windmills and stuff that are nonsense. So
who was it? I think Tom Woods or somebody had one of the founders of Greenpeace on, and he was talking about nuclear and how it's so much cleaner than it used to be. And I don't really remember all the details, but he was just kind of talking it up in a way that made a lot of sense. And he was saying how a lot of these people that they don't want to, a lot of the green people are actually the most conservative when you think about it. They're trying to conserve the environment,
right?
But they don't want anything to change. So it's
right.
The world changes all the time. What do you mean you don't? And if you build a dam, I guess in a way you've gotten rid of one ecosystem, but you've also created a new one. And that was something he was talking about. And so the nuclear, that just seems like such a smart way to go. And obviously there's some risks, but when you're talking about, I feel like most really of these green people,
there's really not.
Most of these people that are talking about carbon emission, it's here's the answer. Why are you ignoring this?
Exactly. Yeah. They, it has a zero emission base now. And with the new technology, one of the coolest things to me, because, the two main questions, and I get this from libertarians too, when I try to talk to them about it, is they go, well, it's not safe. And I'm like, no, it's actually incredibly safe. Lives lost comparative to every other energy source is minuscule. It's a joke. It's not even real. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they say, well, yeah, but what do you do with the waste? Well, it turns out they solved that problem. They can build these small nuclear reactors that would run about 1,000 homes, and the spent fuel from the submarines, the aircraft carriers, the power plants, weapons as they're being decommissioned, that's what it uses, and it burns it to zero. So it's not radioactive at all when it's completed. So you wouldn't have to worry about all that, all the waste nonsense. And so I'm like, it's a perfect scenario. If you really care about the environment, then you kind of gotta be honest and talk about it. But I don't know, that's what I'm trying to push more, is messaging that, hey, the Libertarian Party could come together. I like what Reed and David and them are doing, as far as we may not agree on everything, but we can unify behind certain things. I don't know, let's not blow up little brown children in super poor countries. That seems but also I've been in the Libertarian Party since 2004, and they've never had an energy plan ever, and as I say this all the time, people tell me, oh, people just want to be free. And I'm like, no, they don't. People want to be told what to do. Yeah. So if you want to be free, you're going to have to convince these people, persuade them that your way's best. They'll just randomly wind up more free, which might be confusing at first, but they'll get over it,
They'll figure it out.
Yeah. So you're shilling for Scott Horton's book. I like that, because I like Scott Horton. You
haven't gotten it yet. What the hell's wrong with you?
Scott Horton, I got in an argument with this neocon boomer the other day because they mentioned some lieutenant colonel or something, and they said, oh, they're the preemptive expert on war in American history. And I'm like, no, they're not. They're just not.
I mean, something I've been thinking about lately is like, do you know what it takes to like move up in the ranks in the military? It's really just staying in. And there's so many guys that they've kind of seen behind the curtain and they don't like what's back there, and they start questioning things. And even if you wanted to stay in, kind of the fact that you're questioning things and not just towing the line is already going to be a knock on you. But most people that think that way are like, I'm getting out, like I'm done with this. So as you progress, you're just left with more and more sociopaths, basically, that just think of this as like, this is the way we do things and don't question it. Like collateral damage, that's just part of the equation. You know, that's what we have to do. And so all the good people are getting out.
Yeah, and now the military apparently is going to purge as many, well, what they call extremists as possible. So conservatives, libertarians.
People that believe in the Constitution.
Yeah, you know, I mean, you take that oath and then you're supposed to be like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm just a dancing monkey. My apologies. Like, you know, I see Congress do that a lot with the Second Amendment argument. You'll see them. And it drives me insane when they're like, oh, I served and I believe that red flag laws are fine, or that I'm like, shut up. Like, I'm sorry. It's the only amendment, the only one that ends with shall not be infringed. They were pretty clear on that one.
Yeah.
You know, so I like to upset the boomers, and the conservatives are the ones that I upset the most with it, because I'll tell them that. And I'll tell them all gun laws up to and including background checks are unconstitutional and racist. You don't want to be a racist, do you?
And I think that's part of the thing with like messaging, and I think we need to kind of talk about within this liberty unity movement is that like there's this whole woke aspect, right, of politics that's really like, it's got a lot of force behind it, and people are really like, you know, they're crazy about it, to say the least. But that's part of kind of why it works, is there's a lot of energy behind it, and in a sense we need to take that energy, but obviously put our messaging behind it.
Right. And
I think we have a good opportunity in this liberty unity moment with a lot of different ideas, a lot of different people come. Yes, there's some infighting. That's what libertarians do. But for the most part, you know, people are trying to figure out ways to like bring in people from the left and the right and everywhere else. And I think we need to look at taking that kind of energy and it's kind of like you said, like, even use some of their own language. Just put it kind of behind our messaging. Like, you don't want to be racist, do you? Like, yeah, let's play that card. Like, sure.
Turn it on.
Works. You know?
Well, it seems to work for them. Look at all these people that refuse to talk now. You know, they refuse to share their opinion. Libertarians don't have that problem. But a lot of the quote unquote right, Republicans, conservatives, whatever, they won't even share their opinions, their messages anymore. They're terrified of these people. And I mean, I understand the whole cancel thing, and they have got people fired from their jobs, and but that's never going to end if you just kowtow.
Oh yeah, it's just going to get worse. It's just like a bully.
Yeah,
You've got to stand up to the bully, and using this term figuratively, but punch them in the face, and then they'll stop.
Right.
And of course, you know, not figuratively if they punched first.
Exactly. Nice. Yeah, that's why I was kind of done with the Libertarian Party after, you know, 2020. The messaging, which in my opinion, like, and my 20, you know, in March 2020 when they announced, or maybe it was April, I don't remember exactly, but when they announced their 15 days to slow the spread, you know, we're going to lock everything down, shut all these businesses. I immediately was like, no, this is a terrible idea. Like, don't do it. Don't comply. You know what I mean? And the Libertarian Party's like, well, and I'm like, what is wrong with you? Like,
yeah, I couldn't believe.
I just gave up. I was like, oh, okay, well, these people are idiots, you know? And then I actually watched a interview with Dave Smith, Reed Coverdale, David Fite, and Jeremy Todd. and they were, they'd started this Liberty Unity thing, and they didn't agree on. I mean, it was a couple of hours or whatever they were talking, and Dave Smith had that messaging of the takeover. Mises is going to take over and bring liberty back to the Libertarian Party or something, which, by the way, is pretty good messaging. But they all had a conversation about it, and then they decided. Well, even Dave Smith decided, no, you guys are right. Like, let's just focus on the things we agree on, and we'll leave the other nonsense to the side for later. You know what I mean? And I was like, hey, I can get behind this. And then I started watching more. And so you had like Angela McArdle out there in California who was screaming about the lockdowns from the start, and I'm like, okay, awesome. Well, we all seem to agree. Well, most of us seem to agree these lockdowns are nonsense. And it's been a year and the Libertarian Party didn't even fight back. That just drove me insane. Like,
and it is, but at the same time, there were, as you've pointed out, there were a lot of individuals fighting back, and it sucks that the party with our name wasn't having our back and pushing it too. But I almost like, it wasn't until Dave started talking about it that I was like, yeah, the Libertarian Party hasn't done anything about this, because I wasn't really listening to them or following them. I was listening to guys like Dave and Tom Woods and just individuals who were really good on it. Because if I heard somebody talking and they weren't talking about that, I'd probably been like, well, you have your priorities wrong. So I might have maybe in a way put myself in an echo chamber that shielded me from the fact that they weren't. But yeah, to hear guys that like were paying attention say like, yeah, they're not saying anything about it. I was like, that's kind of odd. Like,
yeah, and if you're going to be the Libertarian Party, when the government says we're going to lock the entire country down, I mean, that's your moment. You know what I mean?
Like
there were a lot of people. Kim Iverson, who is not a libertarian, she's progressive. She was screaming about the lockdowns. You know what I mean? Like, so if you could have unified your party behind such a obvious message, obvious, like, no, this is a nightmare scenario. There were progressives out there that were screaming. You could have got their back. They would have got your back. There were Republicans that were screaming the same thing. It seemed like you had a moment there and they just like pissed it away. And I almost feel like they did it on purpose.
I was going to say that. It almost seemed like the Libertarian National Party was like controlled opposition. Like, we're not going to do anything to rock the boat. We're going to like let this moment pass that we could completely take advantage of because we don't want to rock the boat. And whether that was they thought that they were being strategic to grow the party, that's kind of hard to believe because it's just so obvious to like, newcomers to the movement even. So it seems a little more like it was kind of done intentionally, and it was happening kind of right after Nick Sarwark was making these terrible comments and just being terrible in messaging in general. And he was just getting kind of like dragged over the coals and because he was just awful. So yeah, it's just,
well, there's a lot of gatekeepers at the top. They want to be the biggest fish in a small pond. And I think that had a lot to do with it. You start getting way too many people and they don't like your leadership. Well, you're going to wind up like Nick, where you get defeated by nobody. I mean, when that happened, I was like, okay, the first day it was funny. And then I was like, all right, guys, knock it off. Like, let's move on. There's other stuff more important to talk about. But the gatekeeping is probably one of the things that was the most irritating to me. And we get that a lot from the left side of the libertarian movement or whatever. A lot of them are, they want their issue to be the most important issue. And it can be to you. But, I mean, the lockdown thing, like I said, that one really pissed me off and it got me to bounce. And I was like, I'm done, until Reed and them guys popped in with their stuff. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll look into this a little bit,
And here's what I've been thinking lately, just to kind of show a little bit of good faith to people within the libertarian movement that I don't necessarily agree with all the time. I think there, in a sense, is a place for like the Archie Flowers and the Andy Craigs of the party, because I mean, I remember thinking when Nick was still the chair that like, what if we ever rose to any kind of prominence and it gained any kind of power, if we had somebody like him in charge, he would just turn it into a regular, it would just be like the D's and the R's. There would be no real difference. And so the good thing about some of these people that they challenge, like, no, I don't think that Dave is trying to do like alt-right entryism whatsoever. No. But the fact that there is some people out there trying to like make sure that that's not happening, which you can argue whether that's good or bad. Like, okay, you're trying to make sure bad people don't take over. That's kind of good in a sense, like to keep checking ourselves. Like, let's not ever get so powerful. It's nice to think that that's going to happen sometime, but maybe let's not ever get so powerful that we kind of forget about our principles, right? So having people in there to kind of check that. And I do think that the Libertarian Party, if it ever gained that kind of power, would have a real issue doing like becoming just a regular old party, because there's so many people who are going to be like, whoa, you've crossed this line that like, yeah, the Libertarian Party National is doing this. But just like with the lockdowns, there were a lot of individuals that were pushing back against it. And I think so that's also a check against the party doing that. So I think some of these actors they're bad actors. They're not acting in good faith all the time, but there is kind of a place in there. So just to kind of put my cards on the table, like I'm not trying to kick anybody else out. I don't think anyone else is either. And there kind of is a place for it. I just wish that they would maybe pick their fights a little better, but
I mean, again, that's something they could have their arguments, I think, in the background, but consistently, and I'm not going to name anyone, but when you consistently for the last 2 months have just attacked one prominent person over and over and over, you're not really being of much help, at that. You look childish, you're just going to wind up being left out of the conversation. So if you want to be in the conversation, I don't know, maybe show a little respect once in a while would be nice. But
I feel like I might know who you're talking about, but I won't name it either. But and I've kind of gotten involved in different little arguments here and there, and it will usually last like a day, and then it's like, okay, we got to like move on and focus on like the bigger threat.
I've had that issue, and then I catch myself. I've had that issue, and then I catch myself, and I'm like, no, don't do that. Like, just it's not worth it. Back out, and just move on to things that are more important. Going back to the lockdown thing and I can't even say bad messaging, no messaging, from Libertarian National on it. And like you said, there were some prominent people that were very boisterous about it. But, recently, I'm sure you saw the dust up over the COVID passport thing and Kentucky's tweet, and I mean, the only thing I would say about that is that the message became about not what it was intended to be about. It was intended to be about COVID passports, and that messaging got lost in that fight. Some people tried to hold on to that message. It just didn't work. But we wouldn't be having that argument had the Libertarian Party been as boisterous as I believe they should have been about the lockdowns in the first place.
Yeah, it never would have gotten to the point of having to like put our foot down and say no more at a vaccine passport.
Right, and then
we
now
should have done that a year ago.
Right, but now you also have LP National kind of avoiding the whole passport argument as well. They're like, and throwing a state chair under the bus, and which that's just garbage to me. You should never do that. But
after saying we're not supposed to get involved in states, but here I am, I'm about to get involved and say something.
Exactly. It's like you would have been better off to just not say anything, but my point is that, first of all, I mean, other than Karen Ann, I think the entire LP National needs to be replaced. Like, I almost feel like they're just up there, like I said, so they can be a big fish in a small pond. And it's like, well, that's not good reason. We need people that are going to work together and try to actually literally unify people and get them behind a good message.
Which blows my mind, because like Karen Ann is awesome. And I think she has so much support. So like you said, like get rid of all of them except her. Well, if they want these cushy little jobs, like just playing like the Machiavellian role, like shouldn't you kind of read the tea leaves and be like, this is kind of where everyone's like, if this is really what I want, like Karen Ann, I think is going to hold on to that position because she's got a lot of support. Like people appreciate, and Karen Ann's just awesome. Like
she
just
is.
How she talks and that fire in her and everything anyway. But it's like, I just don't get, I mean, I get just, don't go along with, the popularity that's coming on in the libertarian movement, just like don't go along with the popularity of lockdowns and stuff. But it just seems like you are disavowing your own, like the majority of people within your own party and going along with the majority of people in society.
Right.
To what end? Like you're gaining nothing. Like we're going to gain. So like you said, there's progressive that are against this, and there's a lot of conservatives. Like and the GOP is fracturing right now. Like now is our opportunity.
I'll start with the Democrats though.
Yeah, because they elected Biden, and so the left doesn't like him. I mean, he's basically a Republican to them. So it's such a good, like we just need to be taking the stake and driving it right into the heart of these parties right now.
That's what I'm saying.
You're not going to do that by messaging like they do. Like you're going to have to be a little more aggressive.
Well, and then I was having a conversation. I can talk about the conversation, but not the person. It's a private conversation in as far as their name goes. But I had mentioned, there's a lot of progressives that agreed with going against lockdowns. There's a lot of conservatives. And you also had an opportunity that conservatives realized cops don't work for you. Like they're Praetorian Guard for the state. They don't work for you. You know what I mean? And that was a missed opportunity, in my opinion, for the Libertarian Party. But someone said, well, you're never going to be as big as the Republican Party or the Democrat Party. And I was like, okay, that doesn't matter. And they go, well, how are you going to get power? And I was like, you're going to help break their parties apart. Yeah. If you can, the more division we can cause in their parties, and the more they fracture, they just lose power that way. So you don't need to, gain 50 million more libertarian party members. You just need to fracture those parties down to where they're down to size, and then
divide and conquer.
Exactly. You know what I mean? That's my overall goal.
I just finished reading Alongside Night a couple days ago, and have you read that?
I have not. No.
It's awesome. Like after finishing reading it, I'm like, why does everyone talk about like Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead? Although great books, why do they hold those up in such high esteem? I felt like Alongside Night, and it's a lot shorter too. It's not like 700 pages long.
Ayn Rand was pretty bad about that stuff.
Yeah, but it was really good, and kind of the way it ended. Spoiler alert! If anybody doesn't want to know, it doesn't really give much away. But as basically the U.S. government is like falling apart, and it's kind of turning towards this anarchic society, the agorist cadre is like having this press conference, and a reporter's like, well, who's gonna run things? And they're like, I don't know, talk to like those people over there. Like are you running things? Like you have all these guns and all this power, like what's stopping you from taking over? And they're like, well, what's stopping us is all these other armed groups that are against us. And so we can either all fight, or we can realize we'll be a lot more successful, like finding a way to cooperate, even though we disagree, which we all do every day of our lives. Like Dave Smith likes to point out, like you watch the news and you think there's like a race war going on, but then you hop in a cab with a Muslim who's driving you to the grocery store where you're checking out with the black guy, and you're just like, hey, like there doesn't seem to be any problem. Like we're all getting along just fine.
This is just a media thing.
Yeah. And you could even it doesn't even have to be a different race. Like there's plenty of white people that I completely disagree with.
Yep.
But when I'm out and about, we don't think about that. We're just interacting. And so it was a nice little take on like that could be the best result. Like if the LP ever gained some kind of power, like maybe in a good way, there would be these other powers that can kind of check
mutually assured destruction.
Yeah, at the like lowest level, like we need to get that. Like,
yeah, well, that's the thing is like Carrie Wedler, says it best because a lot of people go, oh, okay, well, in your perfect society, there'd be warlords, and it's like, so your concern is that we'd wind up with government?
Yeah,
it's like, but I agree with you. I don't think there would be. I mean, possibly in some areas you might have some situations like that, but the town down the road from me, 30 miles from me, is not going to attack my town. That would be incredibly unintelligent of them. First of all, ours is bigger, but but you have no reason to do that. Why would you do that? You could just trade with them.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know why people
you're wasting your own resources to attack them. If you're a smaller town, you don't have a lot of resources to waste. But also, if you're the bigger town, you're surrounded by a bunch of little towns that could team up against you. So
exactly.
And guess what? You all have things that each other needs.
Yeah, that's I constantly get these right, or I don't know. I mean, whatever Republicans, I guess, that'll say, well, China's getting too powerful. We have to do something about it. Okay, no, we don't. Like, what do you want to do about it? You know what I mean? What is it you think we should do? And they go, well, if they get too powerful, they'll nuke us. And I was like, no, they wouldn't. That's retarded. Like, why would they do that? It doesn't make any sense. You don't just bomb another country. Okay, unless you're America. But generally, the idea is to.
And why can America do that? Because they're the most powerful and no one else can check our power right now.
Right. And so maybe China rising up is not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah.
Do I think that communism's great? No. But I don't live in China. Like,
well, I don't think the fascism we have here is that great either. So
me neither.
Communism needs to check fascism so freedom can rise up from the ashes.
Yeah, I like that. But it's difficult to explain to people that the primary reason for war is resources. Nuking a country would not make any sense because you're going to blow the hell out of the resources. You know what I mean? So I don't understand people's obsession with that, that like, oh, they're going to, or the government especially, and the war hawks that are, well, we can't allow Iran to get a nuclear weapon. Why? Every country surrounding them has nuclear weapons for the most part. Like, what do you think is going to happen? And they go, well, if they get one, they'll nuke, Israel. No, they won't.
Yeah.
Why would they do that? Like, that doesn't make any sense.
I mean, Israel has one, and they hate Iran. Why haven't they nuked Iran?
Yeah. They're not gonna nuke Israel just because they get a nuclear weapon. But it makes sense to me they'd want a nuclear weapon when they're surrounded by, countries that have them. I mean, duh. But also, America, to me, is in no footing to tell anyone what weapons they can have when we're the only ones that have ever dropped an atomic bomb on another nation. Yeah. It's like, maybe we should keep our mouths shut about that.
Yeah. Man, I was going to say something. Now I've totally lost my train of thought.
Oh, see, that's why I call the show Derailed.
Man. It was about or something.
So let's, I'll maybe it'll come back to you. But so do you still operate your website, your blog, or whatever you got going on there?
Yeah, I still do.
What is that? Because I didn't get to add that into the description, so I'll add it in after. But what is the website there?
It's operationlibertas.com. Okay. And I think I might have written something a few months ago. There was kind of a flurry at the beginning of the lockdowns where I was writing some stuff, but it was all like COVID kind of focused, obviously, because that was like the biggest thing going on, and kind of everyone was doing it, and I was just kind of like over focusing on it. Mm-hmm. And I'd also been listening to Pete Quinones about like agorism and kind of was like getting into that. And we were in East Tennessee at my in-laws' farm, so we were just like, it was basically like we were living the agorist life. Like, let's raise some crops and try to get as self-sufficient as we can, because who knows where the hell the world's going. So I'd kind of put a stop on that. And since my daughter was born 2.5 years ago, that's been tricky to fit that in, because I'm a stay-at-home dad. So
nice.
Yeah.
There seems to be a lot of there seems to be a lot of libertarians that do that. Jeremy Todd's mostly a stay-at-home dad, in which he just had his baby, but I mean, his wife's also a vet, so
yeah,
it's like, well,
so, see, leftists, like we're all about empowering women. Like we have no problem, changing up these gender roles and switching things up. Like,
so, join the
come
team.
on over.
That's one of the things that I do find interesting is that there is a lot of things libertarians agree with Republicans on. There's a lot that they agree with Democrats on, or vice versa. You know what I mean? But I find it odd that, and I think it might be that we're terrible at messaging too, that the Democrats can get all this fervor from the young group, right? But what's funny is when you look at the actual statistics, they get all these people to march around and whatever, and they do the rock the votes and all that stuff. But these people don't vote. They don't actually go out and vote. So for whatever reason, they'll go to a rally, no problem. But then you can't get them to the voter polls. Even with the mail-in ballot nonsense that just happened, they still didn't really vote a lot. But the young people in the Libertarian Party vote all the time. Like all the time. I don't understand what where that break is, because we get them, they're 18, they're like super excited, they want to vote, that's important to them, and they do. But in the Democrat Party, they go, well, look at all these young people that we have. Well, yeah, but what good does that? They don't do anything.
Which is kind of funny, because it's the Libertarian Party more than anyone else that kind of says voting's kind of stupid and it's just kind of supporting the state, and it doesn't really, it's just mob rule, but yet we're still like, well, we're going to fight that fight as much as we can, because
I think sometimes you have to, I mean, you were in the military. Sometimes you got to play by their rules in order to, I guess, overthrow them.
Yeah, I mean, I think so that there's different takes on this, like, do we just like abandon the system and just try to do our own thing, kind of like the just purely agorist route, or do we try to operate in the system? And I'm like, why do we have to argue about this? Like, let's attack from every possible way. Like,
yeah, exactly.
I'm going to work the farm out in East Tennessee to try to have like a backup for food if stuff hits the fan, but I'm also going to try to attack it politically, because I mean, I just see like, the Libertarian Party is just the political wing of the libertarian movement.
Yeah.
It just kind of, to go back to like alongside Knight, they had different like branches. Like they had like a more military wing. I'm not saying we need like a militant wing to go out and like destroy things, but like maybe we do need like more of a militarized security type apparatus within the libertarian movement, just to like protect each other, or to like teach
we kind of have something close. I mean, they're not really libertarians, but the Boogaloo Boys, they identify a lot. They like the libertarians a lot. They're, to me, I first of all, they get such a bad rap. I actually have Magnus on later today. We're gonna talk.
He's awesome.
Yeah, he is. But they're just protectors. They're guardians. They don't care who they're guarding, they're just guardians of people against government. That's basically what they do. And then they guard people against people because, well, people are stupid.
So, and this is something I've been thinking about. Like a lot of our messaging is like reactionary. Like, all right, something happens, now let's message to it. Well, I think sometimes we have opportunities to be a little more proactive and think about things. So like, the Chauvin trial for the killing of George Floyd, like that once that verdict comes out, one way or another, we know that there's going to be a reaction. And if it gets off, which is highly likely, like we know what that reaction is going to be like.
It's going to be violent.
Planning for that now, like, can we start messaging to groups like the Boogaloo Boys and like working with them to go to a Black Lives rally and like protect them from the security force, but also be like, if you guys start like trashing stuff and lighting things on fire, like we're not protecting you anymore. Like we're protecting you from the state, from the cops.
Right.
And that could be a powerful message, just like to reach out to another group that, yeah, we may not agree with on a lot of issues. I think we don't agree with, I think BLM is kind of like the LP. Like there's the national organization that has bad messaging or bad agenda. But a lot of the people out on the street wearing a BLM shirt, like I think we can agree with them on a lot of things. Like we don't maybe think that the issue with the cops is just race. They might think it's race-based a lot more than we do, but we're just like, we hate cops and they kill people of all sorts. So like you're mad about this and we're mad about it too. Yeah. So is there an opportunity to, like, before the Chauvin verdict comes out, can we start messaging things or be prepared one way or the other?
Man. We can do it. We can start doing it. And,
especially if you're on with Magnus, because you guys need to talk about that because he's the guy to like coordinate. He's so good at talking to all these different groups.
Magnus and I have several things that we're going to talk about for some upcoming plans that you and I will discuss off air, but I like that. And I think we should definitely do that. I don't think, look, unless it's completely political, I don't see Chauvin being convicted. I don't see it. I know the media is lying through their teeth to people. They're doing that on purpose because anyone, even in the media with the brain, can watch this trial and go, it's not looking good, and the defense just started their case. But I watched some, I didn't watch all of it, but what I did watch, it's like, is this prosecutor trying to lose on purpose? Like, like, what are you doing? But now I do think that it's possible that one charge might stick, but that's not how they're going to report it though. They're not going to say, like, if they get him for third degree, which I think is the only one they even have really a chance at, but that's not how they'll report it. They'll report it as, that he got acquitted on second degree or whatever. And these people are going to riot. That's what's going to happen. They're going to freak out. So I'm with you. I think we already need to get some messaging out there and try to get some stuff in place to protect these people, not the ones that are burning and tearing things down, but people that are just actually protesting peacefully. Yeah, they're going to need protection because the state is going to come down with a heavy hand. I'm almost certain. Yeah.
And then, I mean, Magnus's speech in Michigan was just like, that says it all right there. Like if we stop fighting with each other, we could scare the shit out of the people in power. If, libertarians and BLM and progressives and conservatives like unite and say like no more of
and Antifa to a point.
Yeah.
I mean, not as much.
I'm willing to work with anybody who is at least on action coalitions. Like maybe there's some things we could work on with them, but I'd be willing to work with anybody based on an issue. And I think when we start to break down a lot of these walls, there's a lot more that we have in common.
I think I'm pretty white-pilled because I'm looking at the response from the U.S. government to the pushback they're getting on the COVID passports, on even the actual vaccine. And I've always been of the mindset, hey, if you want to get it. But don't be trying to force other people to do it. You know what I mean? And so when these people are out there saying, oh, well, we should have these things where if you want, what was that lady on CNN or whatever, where she goes, well, if we don't tell them, look at all these great freedoms you get, they're just going to go get them anyway. Oh, that's terrifying.
They don't have a carrot. Oh, they might be free without us having gotten anything out of them.
Exactly. But I look at that kind of stuff and I look at the meltdown of the mainstream media, which I don't care what they say, they miss Trump. I guarantee it.
Oh,
they miss him.
Wasn't there something with like Brian Stelter? Man, I didn't really look into this a whole lot.
Oh, and Jim Acosta.
Yeah, and they were talking about like, we don't have I don't know exactly what it was, but they were basically like, we don't have as much to talk about because we don't have him to bash on.
Well, no, he said we used to actually talk about the news and then Trump happened. And I'm like, oh, so you admit it. You're not journalist.
Saying the quiet things out loud. And
but what's funny to me is I look at it and I look at the fracturing in the Democrats and I look at the fracturing in the Republican Party and I'm like, the cathedral is crumbling. This is a good thing. This is good. And that's why I say that if they don't like the results or the outcome of the Chauvin trial, The state's not. They're gonna come at them with force to make sure that they shut up and go home. You know what I mean? I think it's going to probably get pretty dangerous, even for the people that are not damaging property or anything like that. But I'm also of the same argument that, like, I didn't see the January 6th thing. I was like, they attacked government property.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I remember kind of like hearing about it and being like, what? Like, not that I'm supporting it, but like, I'm not against it.
No,
and,
but
like, what was it in Minneapolis when they burned down like a police station and the police just left and I don't really care about that, especially when the cops are letting them burn down private businesses. Like, this is the one thing you're supposed to do in the social contract, right? Yeah. This is what the taxes go to, is that you pay your protection money and you get protected.
Exactly.
Going back to the previous conversation, at least when you pay the mafia, they do protect you. So maybe these cartels like actually could work better than the government.
I've talked to people that grew up in mob neighborhoods, older people, when the mob was still basically the primary force there. Like, the cops didn't even patrol the neighborhood; they didn't need to. And almost all those people said my neighborhood was perfectly safe. You didn't mess around in my neighborhood. You know what I mean? Yeah. But we get extorted by the mob that has chest jewelry, and then they don't even protect what they're supposed to do. They just don't. They're like, man, we don't want to. So when they're attacking, like, that's why I know I've upset a bunch of people with it or whatever, but when they're like, well, they've been trying to burn down the federal building in Portland for, like, I don't know, forever. And I'm like, I'd rather them burn that down than burn down like someone's business. Like, I don't want them burning stuff down, but they have a beef with the government. They're taking it out on the government. I'm like, that's how it's supposed to work.
Yeah.
Well,
that, and I mean, there's a reason why a lot of these buildings are made of stone and marble, so they don't ever have to worry about the optics of their building burning down.
Exactly.
Learned that after 1812, after the White House.
They burn everything down.
Like, oh, this doesn't look too good for us. So, I mean, you can't really burn these places down. So,
no, but my outlook on it was like, if I wasn't one of those people that, like, when January 6th, then you had all the screaming heads, Republicans, Democrats, even some libertarians that were like, oh, that's ridiculous. You should never do that. That's blah, blah, blah. That's where our democracy is. And I'm like, okay, first of all, democracy is incredibly stupid. But also, I don't care. Like, they had a beef with the government. They took it out on the government. So I'd way rather that than them take it out on a neighborhood of just people. You know what I mean? Maybe it's a bad take, but I don't care.
Well, no, I think it's really good, because people will talk about, like, but these 5 people or whatever died, including a police officer. But Glenn Greenwald had a great article breaking down how the media lied about that police officer dying. None of it was true. And then once they kind of there was proof that it wasn't true, that CNNs and everybody kind of quietly released statements withdrawing the proof, but they don't make a big deal about it. And Greenwald just breaks down, and he's a lefty, and he's breaking down this is not what happened. And it's like, I think it's because I think when you're being red pilled, it's so obvious. But you're like, how do people not see this? Like, they're basically telling you left and right, this is their agenda. And
that's why I don't understand. This is another thing that we could start messaging, and I think it would make a lot of sense to do so, just for that fracturing, like I was talking about, that we could cause, is you get these Antifa and BLM people, they riot, they burn things down, they get arrested, they immediately get let go. Nothing happens, right? But look at the way they're treating those people that went into the Capitol building. They want to throw these people in the gulag, forever. And I'm like, well, that seems like something that we could use to fracture the Republican Party.
We had a billboard off the highway in Nashville that was an FBI, call this number if you know anybody that was at the Capitol riot. If that billboard is here in Nashville, that's in every major city. They have a billboard like that. Your government is buying billboards with a number
with your
to
money,
a report across the entire country.
Yeah.
Like, this is what the government is doing for you.
I wish we had some really good anarchists that were like great at graffiti, because I would pay them to go put "snitches get stitches" on every one of those billboards.
That'd be awesome. But, maybe just kind of putting that out there, maybe that's all it'll take.
Just saying, if someone wanted to, I have Venmo.
I've got some extra spray paint that's just sitting out on the road by my house if you want to come by. I don't need it anymore.
It's just there.
What you do with it, it's up to you.
No, don't damage property.
No.
But yeah, like that was just the way that these things are treated between the two sides, and people, and I get some lefties that come after me and they're like, well, these MAGA people are in a cult. And I'm like, okay, like how many genders are there? And they're like, as many as there wants to be. I'm like, yeah, they're not the only one in a cult. Yeah. And not all of them are in a cult. You know what I mean? A lot of them just didn't want Biden, and they felt like Trump was doing an okay job. Now, you don't have to agree with that, but it doesn't make them a cult,
In a sense, I mean, and this is part of the problem with conservatives in general and why they're just progressives going the speed limit is like they just roll over. Yeah, they just roll over all the time. I mean, when I'm back out east, it's like, rural area, a lot of Trump supporters out there, and I'm talking to them, and like there's some that are really like fired up for him, but most are just like, yeah, I would basically vote for any Republican because it's not a Democrat, and they think most of them are good. But once the Republicans are in power, they don't care to like if they repeal anything, like the whole thing, like whether you agree with it or not, repeal and replace Obamacare was a big thing that Trump was running on and the Republicans were running on. And they had 2 years to do something about it. And then they're just like, well, it's going to piss a lot of people off. I mean, they're basically like the LP national version of the Democrats and the Republicans.
They are. Tim Pool has this great thing that he says about it. He says that that Republicans don't do anything. He goes, Democrats they'll come in and they'll be like, well, we want to burn the house down. And Republicans go, well, calm down. Let's just burn down the kitchen.
Yeah.
That's basically what they're about.
Never like stand up and like and that's what I think we need to start doing as libertarians. Be like, no, we're putting our foot down. That's what a lot of people said with the Vax passport. Like, this is a line in the sand. Like we want peace more than anything, but like we are not afraid to like start a civil war. Like if you want to implement this level of totalitarianism and fascism, like we want peace more than anything. This is not a threat. Like we want that, but you're going to push us and you're going to cross a line. Like, and we need to be more aggressive and forceful about that with maybe more things. I mean, we don't want to overdo it and then it becomes nothing, but you've got to have a line in the sand where you're like, hell no, like, no, we're not doing this. And it should have been a year ago.
We should be talking about, that kid that just got shot in Minnesota the other day, Minneapolis.
Yeah.
He had a warrant or whatever, I guess, is, whatever. That's where the neocons come in, of course. Well, I mean, look at these pictures of him with a gun. And, and they're like, well, he had a warrant. Okay. For what? Well, it turns out for illegal possession of a firearm. What made it illegal? Like, he has a constitutional right to own a firearm. You people are supposed to be all about the Constitution. Why do you never stand up for it? Why are you like, well, we have laws? Well, we shouldn't. I
saw somebody post a picture, and it was like one picture of him like with his son or his kid, and then the other picture of him holding a gun, and like the media is portraying him as this guy on the left, but he's this guy on the right. And I'm like, no, he's both
guys.
He's a dad who cares about his kid, who also has a gun, probably because he cares about his kid.
Right.
Just like you, Mr. Conservative 2A, don't tread on me, but also have a thin blue line flag on my truck.
I hate that. I'm like, you don't even get it. Like, it's just like, come on, guys.
The point.
I see that stuff in like people in their pickups. They'll be driving around. They have both those flags, and I'm like, you don't even get the irony of that, do you?
Yeah.
Like, they're like, well, the cops are to protect you. No, they're not. Look at 2020. No, they're not. They're Praetorian Guard. They're meant to protect the state,
And with the right messaging through 2020, like we could have red pilled
you could have got so
conservatives on the cops.
Well, people say, "Oh, they're conservative. They are red pilled." No, they're not. They're not. They're not. They're, what's Michael Malice call them? Blue pilled Republicans.
Yeah.
They're like.
Some people believe that red pill means Republican and blue pill means Democrat.
That's not what it means.
Some people truly mean that. And if you're listening and that's what you think, like, that is not it.
that is
red
not
pill
it.
is opening your mind up to the terrible atrocities of the state, basically.
Yeah. And there are plenty of them.
That said, so all of you that did have it wrong, I just recently finally figured out the difference between black pilled and white pilled. I think I read somebody else who had it backwards, and it confused the crap out of me. And now I think I'm good on it now. So it's okay if you get it wrong. Just learn, figure it out, be better.
Yeah, I don't know. I think what's funny is watching the media having to lay all these people off because their ratings are trash and they're just going down. And then you see all these podcasts that are getting bigger and bigger. And so then the media writes these stories about these far right podcasters. And I'm like, don't be jealous. Don't suck at your job.
I mean, and they're going against Substack because guys like Glenn Greenwald are doing great at it. And we don't need you anymore. And that's the beautiful thing. And that's part of the cathedral crumbling. All these little things. I forget who it was, but somebody was saying how they used to think of liberty as this torch that was being carried on for generation to generation and trying to keep that flame going. But he was like, now I'm starting to think it's more like water, and it finds all the cracks within tyranny and finds ways to sprout up freedom. Yeah. And I was like, that's a good way to look at it, because
I like that, because
they can't cover everything.
They can't cover everything.
It's going to be a crap.
My favorite anti-gun arguments from the left or whatever is when they go, well, what, you think you can take on the U.S. Army with your AR-15? I'm like, okay, then you just made your point. You
learned nothing over the last 20 years.
Yeah, but I'm like, okay, so two issues when people say stuff like that. First of all, you just made the point that the AR-15 is obviously not that dangerous, right? The military's got way better stuff. Right? So, why are you trying to take it away? And two, Afghanistan has been 20 years. We're fighting people that are wearing pajamas and sandals. Yes.
Yes, that's all it takes. It just takes a bunch of pissed off people to just attack your weak spots.
We haven't won a war since Vietnam.
We're not trying to go toe to toe with anybody.
Right, exactly. That's not it. And you can't occupy, every corner of the country. You just can't. It's not possible. Sure, you got drones and stuff, but you can't occupy every corner. You know what I mean? And so I like that water analogy quite a lot, because I'll work with BLM. I'll even work with Antifa if we can find something we agree on. But you see all these, and it makes sense. You see all these different groups and all this fracturing. Even in the Libertarian Party, that water is just making its way through everywhere. And I see the progressive left is very disheartened with Joe Biden because, I don't know, apparently he's
a right of center Democrat.
Yeah. I mean, he threw him a couple small bones so far, but look at the border, right? They were like, oh, we're going to have open borders. I'm like, no, we're going to have 200,000 children locked in cages. Good job, guys.
And even the gun law or the executive order on guns, it's like, that didn't change anything.
They don't do anything, and they're not
taking anything away. It's only going to end up affecting people like the guy in Minneapolis who, he gets a charge, and then down the road, because of that charge, they get away with executing it.
Yeah. And I hate when those situations happen, and, because, look, don't shoot people when they're running away, They're not in the military. In the military, we're basically told, don't shoot people in the back, I mean, someone's going to catch it on camera, make you look really bad if for no other reason. Don't do that.
That's one thing that I love to point out to people when they want to talk about if there's a threat, and I want cops to go home to their families too. Sure. I don't want anyone dying, right. But we have a tougher rules of engagement when we're deployed in the military against foreign people who we're at war with than cops do. Like cops are just like, oh, I shot you with my gun instead of my taser. Like, I got administrative leave. And it's like, no, like even not that there's like a rash of people in the military that have actually gone to jail. There are some like people, guys in the military do go to jail for bad kills. But there's that thing in the back of your mind where like you don't want to do that. Even in the military where like you can kind of get away with it a little more because there's not cameras everywhere. You still are like, I don't want to even deal with like having to go on trial or anything like that.
I think there's a conscious idea in your head that you don't want to kill someone that's innocent.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. It's infuriating to me though when they're like, well, she didn't mean to shoot him. She thought she was shooting him with a taser. Then she shouldn't be a cop.
Yeah.
If you don't know the difference between a taser and a handgun, maybe you shouldn't own them. Just saying. Yeah. Like, I'm all about taking weapons away from the state.
Oh, yeah. And that's the other thing. You want to protect cops? Try taking their weapons away and see how their deaths go way down because they are not getting into these confrontations anymore. They're like, yeah, he's running. I'm not going to go after him. Or like, and if all these bad guys know that the cops aren't armed, what use do they have to shoot with them? Like, so I can just run, right? You can't do anything. Like, okay, well, all right, later.
Yeah, basically, if I can outrun you, then this is fine. We don't have to. We don't have to do anything here. Like, I don't know why people always think that. You know, I don't know. It's Republicans for the most part, but it is kind of funny. I watched all last year these BLM peaceful protests all over the country. And it's like, as soon as something bad has happened, what's the first thing they start screaming for? Cops. You're like, you're having to defund the police march, then bad things start happening and you go, oh, call the police, call the police. I'm like, Jesus Christ. Yeah. Like, you know, there's a young man from Kenosha who they're going to try to French fry, but this cop can get away with that. You know what I mean? I watched all the video. I'm sorry that.
Yeah.
Nope. And the Libertarian Party should definitely back him.
Yeah.
I think because, you know, they're like, well, he was too young to own a gun. The Constitution doesn't say that. Like, I don't know, you know, but my state just recently passed a law that it's a felony if I even teach my child to shoot if they're under 16. And I'm like, well, it's a good thing I already taught them. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, I already did. Is
it retroactive? Because anyway, we've got some really weird laws where I live, and they're getting worse. But that's what happens when the majority of population lives in one urban area, and they all tend to team to one color side, I guess. You know, little left of center, so to speak.
So that kind of brings up a good. Well, I wonder what your thoughts are on this. Over the past year, there have been a lot of people like fleeing California and going to like Texas, or just fleeing the city and going to the rural areas. And a lot of people are complaining like, oh, but they're just going to help turn Texas blue, or they're going to. But it's like, well, if the people fleeing disagreed with those policies, I don't think they're going to go from California to Texas and then just try to implement California all over again. I think the people that agree with those policies are probably staying there more likely.
I think it's more a financial situation because a lot of those people in California can't flee. They can't afford to. Well, they could if they really wanted to, but they're not doing it. I think you're right. I think a lot of the people are like, yeah, this doesn't work for me. I got to bounce, you know. Some of them probably would be like, oh, well, they probably try to implement the same nonsense because, well, people aren't very bright. But I think it's a good thing in the sense that if they spread out from those major areas, they lose power. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So now there's less of them. So if 25 progressives move into my town, they don't have any power. Like that's not gonna change anything. And it's likely that being in that different environment and seeing that, hey, we still have running water and electricity and stuff without all the nonsense. They might. What's that?
These people aren't as backwards as I thought.
Yeah, exactly. They might actually like kind of turn their head and go, huh, like Cassandra Fairbanks is one of those where she had her home attacked in Washington, D.C. with her daughter there. So she bounced. She sold her place and she moved to West Virginia, and she was a lefty. And now she's very statist righty, but she's but that was part of like one of the stories that she told is part of what changed her mind is meeting them, getting out of that progressive liberal city bubble and actually meeting these people and go, oh wait, no, they have businesses and families, and they're a lot smarter than I've ever been told, and you know what I mean. So
yeah, I mean, there are at least some silver linings that I can find with the lockdowns. Not that I would support them to get these silver linings, but people moving to different areas and kind of being exposed to like, oh, you're not a backwards hick. You just,
right.
I understand why you have some of these values now. Or people like, oh, homeschooling is not impossible. And like, this is what teachers they've decided their safety is more important than my kids' education. Like, okay, like I can do
when
this.
When did we ever in history put the older population above the younger? Ever in history? Yeah. This has never happened before.
Yeah. I mean, maybe this is a problem of people living longer than they've ever lived before that now.
Maybe, but
like, I don't know.
I mean, it just seems.
I think it's also part of a problem of look who's in power and how fucking old they all are. I mean, Jesus.
Like, it's archaic.
Geez, like of course they want to hold on to their power any way they can, and if a virus is going to threaten that, they're going to lock you in your fucking home so that they don't die from your cough because they're so old they would from the flu.
I can't believe that Trump survived that, and I know they're like, oh well, he's the president, he got all the best medicine. I'm like, it doesn't matter, he's old and he's fat and he survived it, you know what I mean? So why are we hiding from this thing? I don't that's funny. I don't know, man. Like, it just baffles me that we, and then now they're like, well, if you don't have your vaccine, then I don't want you around me. It's like, why? Do you not think the vaccine works? Like, this doesn't make sense to me. Like,
it blows my mind. And
one upside, though, is I know that I was reading a study the other day that 40% of, I guess it's something like 80% of public schools are now back open, at least to like a 75% point or capacity, but I think it was like 42.4% of American students never went back. They're all just being homeschooled.
That's awesome.
And I think that's great because that means a lot of parents saw what was going on, probably in some of the classes, and went, well, that's nonsense. We're not doing that anymore. And then all this teacher union crap. I ain't sending my kid there. What's wrong with you people? You know what I mean? These people are nuts. Like,
and I'm all about like supporting teachers, not the ones in unions who want just to get paid to stay at home. But exactly. This is such a good opportunity. Like, we actually have a lady that comes over once a week just for an hour to teach my daughter some stuff. She goes to a preschool as well, a private one, but we have somebody come over just to kind of teach her at home. So I can learn some things too on how, like, some skills to like help her learn. And I've talked to a neighbor who she was a kindergarten teacher, but she couldn't do the stay at home like virtual stuff because she's got a kid too. So I talked to her about like, have you thought about like doing like a pod? Because she already nannies a couple other kids.
Big fan of that idea.
Yeah, like I'm all about like, this is a great opportunity for teachers to go out in a smaller environment that they would probably appreciate more and actually get paid less, or I'm sorry, get paid more because they've got just a handful of kids whose parents are chipping in. And if we can get that going, it's not long before we can start chipping away at property taxes because people are going to see like, why am I paying?
That's the number one thing that they supposedly use property taxes for is for the schools. Well, my kid doesn't go to your school. I'm not paying that. Bite me. You know what I mean? I love the idea of pods. I actually have a teacher that left the union out in California, left the union because of all this nonsense, she was like, these kids need to be educated. What are we doing? Like, they're not going to give us the virus. Like, calm down, and so she left. She quit the union, and she worked specifically with 10 sets of parents, and they just built a little pod. So she literally is now it's a private business. She privatized education. You know what I mean?
Think about how awesome, like I thought about this the other day. I was like, what if like you go on like LinkedIn or something and there's this person who's like the CEO of some private school who like started this up and it's gotten, fairly, maybe it's national, maybe it's just in a state, but they've started this awesome business that has all these great results. And like, that's something you can do. Like when you think of teachers, you're like, okay, there's a lot of teachers out there and there's like some administrators and like a principal. Those are the things you could do. Or you could be a business owner and a teacher.
Yeah.
And the administrator or whatever.
You'd be all of it.
That would be something that people would actually look up to a lot more. A lot of people look up to teachers, rightfully or wrongfully, but you could look up to somebody like that who's like started a business and made school affordable and better. And like, that's awesome. Like, but we don't have that. Like, even though we have a lot of private schools, there aren't individuals just everywhere that you can turn to that like they're an expert in their field. And
I think that's going to start
on this.
I think that's going to start changing, though.
I see it happening. Yeah.
Especially you've got a bunch of states now that are passing legislation where they fund the student, not the school.
Yeah.
And so the money goes to the parents, and then they can use it for charter, private, public, if they want, whatever, or homeschooling in a lot of them. So that's a perfect situation where even the lower income bracket, right? You still get these education dollars to spend on your child. So you can hire the teacher, right? You and a couple neighbors come together. That teacher could easily make 6 figures, no problem, with just 8 or 9 kids. You know what I mean? Yeah. And they're going to get a much better education because what do we always hear? Well, the schools are too crowded and we don't have enough money. What the hell do you keep doing with all the money? You try to raise my taxes every 2 years, my property taxes. Yeah. In fact, most of the time you actually pull it off. Yeah. Like, what are you doing with it? You know what I mean? Like, that makes me crazy.
Yeah.
So we are just over an hour here. We're going to drop this one down. I'll definitely want to have you come back on so we can talk some more. This was a great conversation. And then we'll talk offline about a couple things we're working on for a few minutes if you got a few.
Yeah, man, I got a few. Yeah.
All right, man. All right.
I appreciate it.